In this video, I'm going to demonstrate couch-based passive stretching to the quadricep muscle group. We're going to do static passive stretching first of all, and then we're going to go into PNF passive stretching. So PNF stands for proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, and it's a form of advanced stretching which incorporates an isometric contraction, which then triggers a deeper relaxation response in the muscle tissue. So it's really useful for helping to deepen that stretch. Okay, so our client Lydia is in the prone position, and this is really useful to accompany. You can either do these techniques in the middle of a treatment, or you could do them at the end of the treatment. Obviously, we're focusing on the quadricep muscle group here, but at the end of the treatment, we could also then turn our client over and then apply passive stretching to the hamstring muscles as well, so that we're getting balance on both sides of the limb. Okay, so we want to expose the area that we want to massage first. And I'm just going to tuck the towel into the top of Lydia's shorts there. I want to make sure that the towel isn't in the way, so it's stopping the stretch. So initially, to stretch the quadriceps, we literally need to flex the knee. But the nice thing about stretching the quadriceps on the couch here within the treatment is that the couch is pushing the hip into an extended position. So we can often get a nice deeper stretch, the length of the rectus femoris, which is one of those quadricep muscles which crosses the knee and the hip joint. When we're doing this in a standing position, often people, especially if they're tight in this area, will flex the hip slightly as they go into that stretch and don't realize that they're closing off this part of the muscle. So being on the couch here enables that opening at the front of the hip. Okay, so we just need to bear that in mind when we come into the stretch. You want to think about your body position here. So I'm taking my body into a lunge position. I'm making sure the client's nice and relaxed. Sometimes they try to assist with the movement. So if they are assisting, just give the leg a little bit of a wobble there, and that might trigger the client to relax along with asking them to relax. Okay, and then from here, I'm not pressing into the joint too much here, I'm just below the joint, and I'm just placing my other hand here around the glute area, just so that I can then feel if they're trying to flex at the hip. If this stretch was feeling quite strong for the client, they might be then trying to lift the couch, lift the bottom off the couch a little bit by flexing the front of the hip. You're feeling restriction there. I can feel that there's a bit of restriction now as I'm trying to flex the knee further. So Lydia's probably in a little bit of a stretch position now. Can you feel that stretch, Lydia? Yeah. Okay, so we can see that we've got a little bit more space here to go to before her foot gets towards the bottom, which foot on the bottom would be then considered that end range. So I'm just going to hold this here for about 15 seconds. So we're now doing that static passive stretch. So it's passive because I'm putting the client into a stretch position. Okay, so if we were focusing purely on that static passive stretching, after about 15 to 30 seconds, we would then lower the leg down. Okay, we could repeat that stretch twice or even 3 times just to deepen that stretch slightly further. Or we could use the PNF principle. So in the PNF principle, okay, we're taking the leg back into that stretch position. So I'm just feeling for that initial biting point. Again, like with that static stretching, we're going to hold this for about 15 seconds. And then after about 15 seconds, we're then going to ask the client to press their shin into my hand. You need to think about the size of the client and the strength of the muscles of the client. They're literally just trying to match your pressure. They're not trying to push you over. But if you have got a larger client, make sure you've got a nice big foot base so that they're not going to push you over before you tell them not to. Okay, so Lydia is now going to push her shin back into my hand. That's going to force the muscle to contract. You're holding that here for about 6 seconds. Now be careful when the client relaxes. You don't want to fall on or towards the client. So as she stops that contraction, you're controlling your body weight. And now I can probably go slightly further towards her bottom. How's that feeling?
Yeah,
Okay, is that a good stretch? Not too much?
No.
Okay, good. So constant communication with the client, making sure they're not holding their breath, that it's not feeling painful. If it's painful, they won't be able to relax. Might be slightly uncomfortable, but not painful. Okay, we'd hold this for another 15 seconds. Okay. And then again, after that second round of 15 seconds, the client then again is going to push back into the hand. You're just restricting the movement. Okay, so producing an isometric contraction. They're just matching your pressure. And then after that 6 seconds, they relax. Make sure that you can feel that they've relaxed the muscle. And then we can take that stretch slightly further. And we can see now that Lydia's heel is just on her bottom. Excellent. So we've increased that range. And this form of PNF stretching is really quite nice because it's really quite visual, and it helps to increase the motivation of the client because they can see that change in their flexibility. Okay, so that was Lydia's heel, wasn't quite on her bottom first. So that's the first stage of the stretch that we'd want to do. We could also incorporate the hip flexors, or the part of the rectus femoris that crosses the hip in this stretch as well. And one way that we can do that is by bringing that leg up. Okay, and then from here, holding this with one hand. If you lift the leg, take your other hand just underneath her knee here. And we're going to use one hand to bring that heel in towards the bottom. And with the other hand, we can place, the foot onto the shoulder there and then lift here. So now we're stretching the front of the hip and we're stretching the quadriceps as well. Okay, once we've got this hand here to make sure they're not rolling and lifting the back up. Once we're happy that the client isn't rolling at the hip, we can then use that hand to bring the other foot back down and increase that stretch across the quadricep area. Okay, so it was our passive static stretching to the quadriceps, along with our PNF stretching to the quadriceps whilst the client is on that treatment couch. And also that adaptation to help to open up the front of the pelvis, including that hip flexor area.